Without further ado, let's get into this. Episode 7, pretty exciting stuff. I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast so far. I've heard back from a few of you guys. I love hearing the feedback, positively or negatively. We're always open to some constructive criticism, but so far, so good. And I'm ready to keep this thing going. What about you, buddy?
Absolutely. I love the fact that we got questions coming in. Hockeyshare.com/questions if you want to send anything our way to answer on the show. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun watching kind of people take bits and pieces of it and roll with it and chime back with some feedback. So I love
Absolutely.
it.
I think the more we can help players, coaches, whatever, the happier it makes us. Hopefully, the happier it makes you guys. We'll just keep this thing going. And if you're looking to find out more of what I do, you can check out hockeyprotraining.com, all the stuff we got going over there. So let's get into it. And so the first thing I kind of wanted to know is like when coming into the season as a head coach, what are a couple of things that you have to have under control and organized in order to make sure that your team's set up for success?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you have to actually have under control is sort of a knowledge of your players, and it really helps. And I'll say this tongue in cheek, but it really helps knowing their names and knowing a little bit about them and knowing what positions they play, because not every coach is lucky enough to have that sort of under their belt. Actually, this season, because I recently moved, I'm actually walking into the season, going into first games this weekend, still learning guys' names, right? And still learning guys' positions and learning guys' tendencies. So certainly the more you know about your players, just from an individual standpoint, it really helps you set sort of the basic understanding of where you're going to start with your players. If you're lucky enough, as I've been in the past, where you have a very strong grasp of your team and who they are and what their strengths and what their weaknesses are, man, I think you really try to get a grasp on your culture early. And I think that's the single most important thing. So even in this case where I don't know my players as well, I'm trying to nail down what our culture is going to be, what we're going to be known for. Trying to get the kids to embrace that culture. I'm trying to get their feedback on it. I'm trying to get their feedback on where they've been, what they want to get to, and then it's my job to sort of piece together the chart, the path for them to hopefully get to that point, right, and set them up for success. So, so it really boils down to getting to know your players and what are their goals and what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses.
Sounds good. And like, let's dive into that culture a little bit, just for you specifically as a coach. Maybe not a lot of other coaches are trying to do that. They're not familiar with that kind of idea. What are you looking to define as your team's culture? What are a few of the things that you're looking to make sure that you instill in your players?
So we always want to be hard to play against. That means we finish our checks. That means we get aggressive on pucks. That means we're working hard every time. We might lose a game, but we're not going to be outworked. That's the type of mentality. And that mentality isn't something that you can flip a light switch and have happen for you. That's something that has to be, instilled in practice. And, that requires a little bit of yelling, a little bit of discipline, a little bit of just sort of setting those expectations as a coach and saying like, here's where we draw the line. This is not acceptable to do this, this, and this. This is what I expect every time we hit the ice. And, for me, like I communicate a lot with my players, and I sit down and I talk with them before practice. We go through our practice plans so they have an idea of what we're going to do when we hit the ice. My expectation is real simple. You can mess the drill up if you're going real hard, but you're not going to mess the drill up because you're not paying attention, and you're not going to mess the drill up because you're going half speed and the timing's off on the drill, right? You're going to make a mistake and you're going to make it hard. And that's, so when I say culture, those are some of the things that I go for, is just really try to get that work ethic instilled into the guys early, and try to get them to understand and embrace that work, because that work it's the difficult part. It's not fun, right? It's not easy, but it's something that has to be done day in, day out. Has to be embraced by the team and the players.
And especially like when I look back at my career in that early part of the season, that is a grind, right? That first month, those first couple weeks, coming out of training camp, part of training camp, that's not an easy time of the season. And I think right there you can really see what kind of team you have, what kind of players you have, and what kind of buy-in percentage you have from everybody, right? Because when you're going through training camp, oftentimes you're going to have fitness testing or two-a-days or a little bit heavier practices to make sure you guys have those legs moving into the season. So whether it's a bag skate or a conditioning skate or whatever you want to call it, it's going to be harder miles in that early part of the season, right? So then I think you can really get a grasp on the group. And as a player, as an older guy, when I was a leader, that's what I would look around and say, like, okay, who's bought in here, right? Because the guys that are just goofing around during that part of the season, you can pretty much bet they're going to be goofing around come the middle of the season when times get tough, right? Because that is the tough time. It's not fun to start it. It's fun for the first couple of days. You see your buddies, it's exciting, but then you get into that actual work that you're talking about. That's when the grind really starts.
Yeah, your first week, maybe 2 weeks are really exciting because, like you say, it's fresh. Everybody's excited to see their friends and get back on the ice and get to it. But boy, I'll tell you what, shortly after that, you figure out real quick who's put the work in and who hasn't. So, in my case, I figure out in probably 2 or 3 practices, who am I going to have a tougher time getting the
Mhm.
culture buy-in from because they haven't done anything all summer. Hey, great, you had a lot of fun at the beach all summer long. That's awesome. But
Plus, like
now
you,
it's here.
plus, like you
It's work
talked
time.
about. Sorry to cut you off, but like you talk about, you don't know where they were before. You don't know what the culture was like before you got them, right? And so that's always a
Right.
difficult thing, probably for a coach to try to remold that player's thinking, remold his work ethic to say, listen, I don't really give a crap what you did last year or how you worked before. This is kind of how we do things now. And you'll see that sometimes with players who have had that easy road for the last couple of years. Maybe their coach wasn't that dedicated, or maybe their culture sucked, whatever it may be, right? So now you as a coach have to take that player and almost remold him, right?
Absolutely, and you hit the nail on the head with the fact of the preparation. And if you want to instill that culture, you have to be prepared as a coach, right? I can't come in and say, hey, I demand this, this, and this, and the guys go, cool, what are we doing for practice today? And you go, I'm not sure yet. I mean, that's all of a sudden you've just broken that trust
Mhm.
with your players. So you have to walk in and say, this is the game plan. Here's what it's going to be, and have that ready to go and be prepared for that. For the second you walk into the rink is, you know, because they sense that, man. Kids are smart. They sense if you're prepared or if you're not prepared. They sense if you know what you're talking about and believe what you're talking about, or if you don't, if you're just faking it. So, yeah, you definitely, you not only see which players put in the work, but you also see which coaches put in the
For
work.
sure. I've had that coach where he's just standing there and you can see he's a deer in the headlights, and you're thinking as a player, this is going to be a long season if this is my guy. I've literally had a guy my first year pro. I'm not going to call him out, but he'll never listen to this. But anyways, this guy had no idea, no idea. Like literally 2 weeks into the season, we had some East Coast guys in our team that were looking around the room like they couldn't believe some of the things that were going on because they were used to a professional environment. And oftentimes you'll get to Europe and things aren't always done the same everywhere, right? And at one point, my buddy just had to take over. He went up to the coach and said, "Listen," because he was a hard nosed, dedicated. He's done everything right his entire career, college player. He couldn't believe some of these practice. There was no practice plans, right? It was just three lines shooting and whatever. And you could see right there that our team was in a lot of trouble. And if he didn't take over and start putting in some, as you said, culture, we were dead in the water. So it's a good time to figure out who's there and who's not, right? And if you're paying attention, it really doesn't take that long to figure out if that coach knows what's going on or he doesn't, right? Not everyone's paying attention. Not everybody cares as a player. Some guys just like to show up to the rink and go home. But I don't know. You'll figure it out, like you said, real quick.
You do, and yeah, you're absolutely right. If that's the look on the face day one from your coach, then yeah, it's probably going to be a long season.
I think
Like
this
there's
goes
no,
back to like confidence we talked about in the previous episode, right? Like sometimes you do have to fake it until you make it as a coach. Because if you walk into that room with that attitude, like you're lost, you're scared. Just think about you as a coach when you're sitting in that room. You're in the center. Everybody's looking at you. You're the man, right? You got to be ready to go. So if it takes you 10 minutes before practice, get yourself kind of mentally there. You got to do something to get yourself ready to make sure those players know that you know what you're doing, right? It's probably best to put the work in, like Kevin said, and make sure you're super over prepared. But those players are looking to you to be the leader.
yeah, and I don't get why coaches, expect a ton from their players and then expect that they can just walk into the rink and flip it on. Now, granted, sometimes life gets in the way and you're going to have those moments where you have to just walk into the rink. But man, if you can control it, spend the 10 minutes beforehand, spend the hour beforehand. Make sure you're walking into the rink. Make sure you've got your whiteboard. Make sure you've got your marker. Make sure you've got your bench card, whatever the case may be, your practice plan. But be prepared. We'd expect our players to be prepared. Why wouldn't we expect ourselves to be prepared?
Yeah, for sure. I think preparation is key with anything, right? You can't just step into something and just wing it unless you got that experience, right? That's where experience kind of comes into play once in a while for a coach, where you can just have that off day, step in there, know he's put in years of work, and know he's going to be able to just show up and do that work. But until you've done that, I think being over prepared is what I've found best as a coach to really, show up there with the work already done.
But even when you can just walk into the rink and quote unquote get it done, that's coming from having planned in the past and having that experience. So you already know what you're doing, right? You already know what that plan should look like, and you have enough experience then at that point to make adjustments on the fly if needed. And that's where, especially coaches who are young in the game need to understand that that's not something that you have the luxury of being able to do. You have to walk into the rink, not only have your plan, but maybe even have a backup plan, right? Know kind of what's going on, and here's how I'm going to react if this doesn't go according to plan.
I've told this story before, probably even on the podcast, but my first couple practices, I literally thought I could do that. I literally thought, because I've played hockey forever, I could just walk into a practice and just run a practice. And it was like 10-year-olds, and I was so embarrassed. I got so flustered because you never realize that pressure of everybody looking at you, looking for an answer. It's hard when you're not used to it. It is hard. It's challenging, and it gets you on your toes. And if once you put that work in, once you're over prepared, it gets easier, right? So it just makes more sense, like you said, to just make sure you've put in that work. And just kind of to switch gears here a little bit, when you're talking about putting in the work and getting prepared for the early season stuff, what are you looking to work on maybe the first couple weeks from not so much a skill side, but almost like a technical side with your team? What kind of practice plans are you setting up? Are you putting into place to make sure you're ready for that first couple weeks of the season?
Yeah, I always put in practice drills that will show me exactly where they're at, where they're at with their ability to execute what my end vision for my system is. So I'm going to put together drills that have maybe, I'm used to working with bantam, midget, and older players. So I'm going to put together drills that are going to show me, can this group of guys put together 10 passes to make a play, to make a drill work? And if the answer is they can't get past 2, then okay, then that's fine. Now I know my starting point, right? So I'm going to adjust on that. From a systematic standpoint, I'm always going to work on putting pressure on the puck first. Because it just gets them, again, it's probably the easiest in terms of setting the culture. It's, there's nothing that says, we're going to go hard and be hard to play against, like putting pressure on a puck, right? So that's definitely part of it. But yeah, I definitely throw in drills where I want to see guys battle. I want to see them battle one-on-one. I want to see if they compete. I want to see if they give up. I want to see what their body language is like when they get beat. I want to see if they're strong enough mentally to stay with the battle. I want to see, if they're going to pick their teammates up. I want to see if they're going to take liberties on their teammates and put them in bad situations. I want to figure out who these players are. So I'm going to have battle. I'm going to have a little bit of structure, and then I'm going to have a little bit of, how well do we handle the puck in terms of, that's my early season structure. And, I think we're probably similar with most teams. We're somewhere around 3 weeks of true practice before we head into game scenario. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but it's always, about 3 weeks, give or take a week or two in there. And but I definitely I try to put together drills that are specifically going to show me who do I have.
Gotcha. So what about for a younger coach, someone coaching novice, peewee, Adam, something like that? Do you have any tips for that coach? Like, it's just, say he just got the job, it's his first day on the job, his kid's on the team, he's fresh, he's new, he's got some hockey background, but he's not that experienced of a coach. Do you have any tips for that guy specifically walking into that first week? A couple of things he should probably be working on.
Work on a drill that you're comfortable running, right? And I say that because one of the things that becomes very apparent with more experienced coaches and younger coaches, if you're on the ice, if you're a younger coach and you haven't had that experience, you're watching a more experienced coach sit there and call out things that you had no idea were even going on because you're not able to process that, right? So if you can start out with a simple drill that you're comfortable running that will give them benefit, right? Get them moving, get them battling, whatever you may be looking for, then it gives you that opportunity then to just focus on some of the things that are actually going on in the drill rather than actually functionally running the drill. And that's the toughest part for a young coach is a lot of times they get caught up in running the drill rather than teaching through the drill and allowing that sort of allowing that drill to show you what you have and provide teaching moments.
For sure. Like, I think another good tip, just keep it as simple, like you said, keep it as simple as possible. Because I think a good point you made there is a lot going on when there's a drill going on, right? Where do the pylons go? How do my lines look? Are my players paying attention, especially the younger kids? Are they goofing off in line if your assistant coaches aren't kind of on the ball, right? So try to keep things as simple as possible until you get your feet underneath you and you get that confidence. And like Kevin said, looking for things inside the drill that your players actually need to work on. So then you can take the next step and actually work on those things within a different drill, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, keep it simple, keep them moving, be conscious. Certainly when you're putting your first practices together, be conscious of how many guys are moving at one time, be conscious of how many guys are on the ice. I mean, if you start to fall, into a 1-to-10 work rest ratio, you're going to lose the attention, especially with younger kids. If you've got 40 guys on the ice, there's times where we have 35 guys on the ice together. We have to design that practice much different than we do when it's just my, 18 skaters.
I think that's a great takeaway right there. Always try to design your practice based on how many players you have and how many coaches or helpers you have out there as well, right? I know within my job as a coach mentor, that's pretty much the main thing we were taught to do is make sure the kids are moving as much as possible. Whether that's 10 kids, 15 kids, 25 kids. They don't want the kids just being out there for an hour and only skating for 5 minutes, right? So try to work that into your practice plan as much as possible, right? Keep the lines going, keep the lines evenly separated, make sure your drills are constantly flowing through one another, and you're getting the most out of that hour as you possibly can, especially as a new coach, right? When you got a new team, they're all fresh, they're all ready to go. You want them to get as many reps in as possible, not only for them, but for yourself as well, so we can see what's going on and you can just start error correcting as you go. So I think those are a couple simple tips you could probably take away. Just getting your season started, right?
Yep. And the last one is ask for help. I mean, like you say, there's coach mentors in place in a lot of programs. There's hockey directors in programs. If they're worth their salt, then they're going to be there to help you and support you. And don't be embarrassed to ask for help. I think that's where a lot of guys let the pride get in the way, where, it's as simple as saying, hey, I got, this time I got 35 guys on the ice. I'm really struggling coming up. I need a drill where we get some battling and going. What, you got anything that might work for me? Just ask the simple question. I think
that's what I love about that job. It's like, you will meet a lot of guys who, whether they have a know-it-all attitude or their egos too much gets in the way too much for them to ask for help. I don't know what it is, but you have those coaches. It happens. But I just love when some guy comes up to me, hey, Maddie, do you have like a 2-on-1 down low drill you can do? And you're just like, yeah, I'd love to get involved and help you out, right? I think that always goes both ways as a coach, someone looking to learn, or as someone like myself still looking to learn, right? I love the interaction between coaches is one of my favorite things being on the ice. So don't be afraid to ask for help. I think the more you know, the more you can now give back to your players. So don't let that get in the way. Make sure you're asking for help. I think that's a great tip. I think more coaches need to do that. I think there needs to be more coach collaboration because at the end of the day, it's about getting better as a coach. So you can then help those players, right? It's not about being the best, but it's about being the best you can be to give back and help others.
Yeah, that's it. And, I know sometimes it gets tough asking for help in terms of personalities. And, there's a certain level, some guys get self-conscious if you invite another coach on the ice, right? And they're afraid they're going to lose their voice. But I'm telling you, the best thing you can do is do what's best to support the players, not your ego.
Yeah, I think that was the toughest part about this job I had as a coach mentor. I was supposed to go out there and help the coaches coach their team. Right. And that's not a comfortable thing for everybody to do. And I didn't know how that was going to go across, but I would say 90% of the time, the coaches were cool with it. They liked it. They appreciated it. They wanted the extra help. You get the 10% where they'd literally ask you to leave and you'd be like, all right, you got it all figured out. That's cool. I don't want to be somewhere I'm not wanted. And I get that. I think some coaches just want to coach their team, and we were only out with every team 1 or 2 times. It wasn't like we were out there every day, but I think you should always take advantage of whatever help you can get and just immerse yourself in the information, immerse yourself in the knowledge around coaching, because you can always pick something up, right? I guarantee I'll pick something up from Kevin just from this conversation alone. And I think if you open your mind to other ideas and other possibilities, it's endless where you can kind of take your coaching career and where you can take your team, right? I think the best coaches are always learning. They're always picking things up. They're always paying attention, not only in practice, but after practice, and going back over their practice plan to see what worked and what didn't and what was successful and what wasn't, right? So just keep that mind as open as possible, especially on in the early goings, and just try to connect with your players where you can. So I think that connection goes a long way.
Yeah. And listen, the best of anything, of any profession continues to grow and learn, right? It's this, we're not talking hockey here. We're talking, life. If you want to be the best accountant, you're going to continue to study and you're going to continue to read. And that's part of the nature of trying to be the best of what you can be.
Yeah. And if you're not, you're doing your players a disservice at the end of the day, right? So always something to keep in mind for sure. And I think one thing I touched on briefly is that connection with your players. Always try to make that like as early on as you possibly can. Would you not say that's a super important part of being a coach, especially in the early going? Like I find I get the most out of the players that I connect with the most because they're comfortable with me, I'm comfortable with them. That feedback's going on. It's a two-way street. They're comfortable to ask questions. I'm comfortable to give constructive criticism or feedback or whatever it may be. But you see sometimes with players, they're almost scared of their coach, right? They don't want to ask that question. They don't want to put themselves in an uncomfortable position where they might get better because they might screw up and they might get yelled at. So I think maybe that's something we could talk on just briefly is that connection with your players and trying to be as close to them as possible in order to get the most out of each other, right? And hopefully help the team win games.
Yeah, and I think there's got to be a clear line though, right? Like there has to be just here's where we draw that line. Here's where it's not close and comfortable anymore. Here's where here's where things are going to get difficult. Here's where I am going to yell at you, right? But if you build that trust and you build that relationship, a lot of times you are going to have a little bit more success when you actually have to discipline them as well, right? But you have to set clear boundaries with the player coach interpersonal relationships. There, you can't it can't be all buddy buddy. It's got to be there has to be a professional capacity there too. Where you're not a peer, you are the coach.
Yeah, because that buddy will get taken advantage of real quick, right? I've seen that on teams where the coach was trying to be buddy with everybody. Then when it's time for him to put his foot down, you're like, sure, buddy. You know what I mean? Like, you're just not going to listen
to it. Can't take it serious.
Yeah, you can't take it seriously. And I've had guys who hang out in the room before practice and they want to go bowling after practice. And it's just like, dude, do we have to tell you to go in the coach's room and just be the coach? Because like you said, you got to have there's got to be kind of the boss relationship. Someone's got to be in charge at the end of the day, right? It's not always the best thing to be, but it just has to happen, right? Sidney Crosby's got to answer to somebody, or else he's just going to go do whatever he wants the entire game and be on his own program. So that's a great point.
Yep. So I think one of the other cool topics to talk about with early season preparation is embracing the results of early season games. And when I say embracing, you have to look at both sides of it. If you have a ton of success and you go 5-0 on a weekend, good for you. It's September, it's August, whatever it is, right? It's early. Don't let that get to your head. If you go 0-5, guess what? It's August, it's September, it's early. Don't let that get in your head. Mm-hmm. And I think too often, there's a ton of expectations that occur that build up through the off season from the time tryouts hit till the time you play the first game. There's certain expectations that build, and a lot of times there can be a lot of pressure behind those expectations, and the pressure is okay. But I think it's important to talk about what to look for in those games rather than paying such close attention to results, right? And like I always say this, if I have this year, I have a group that I literally have spent no time with other than when I got out here. Okay. So I haven't had the chance to work with them for a year or two so they understand what I'm going for. It flat out, it's going to probably take until November until that's comfortable. So in September and October, what I'm looking for, are we going hard? Are we putting pressure on pucks? Are we, disciplined? Are we showing up to the rink on time? Are we doing little things right? I'm not necessarily worried as much about the win-loss record. I'm worried that we're doing the right things. And it's super easy to get caught up in the wins and losses. But I do know that if we do the right stuff,
the wins are going to come.
The right stuff's going to happen.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's just setting yourself up for success long term, right? Especially if you're new to a team or you're a new coach. It's like things might not go your way right off the hop, but you got to stick with it because oftentimes you let that negative energy set in because you're just focused on the wins and losses. You're just focused on the results. But like you said, as a coach, you got to be making sure the things are in place to make sure you're successful November, December, whatever, January. You can make that push in the middle of the season and really get your team over that hump, right? So it's nice to start the season because everyone's excited and you're undefeated. It's always great to be undefeated for that first game at least anyways. And it's nice when you go 20-0. I've gone 20-0. It's a great feeling to start the season out like that. But realistically speaking, it's not always going to go like that. So it just comes back to all the things we've talked about in previous episodes. Like, what do your habits look like? What does your day-to-day look like? What's your off-ice work ethic? What does it all look like, right? What is it setting you up for, right? Those are the things you have to have in place as a coach. Make sure your players understand, because the results come and go, right? The best teams win, the best teams lose. That's just how the game goes. The puck bounces this way, the puck, there's so many things that go into winning a hockey game besides just your skill level, right?
Yeah,
So,
and it's important. It's important to also recognize and accept that your message to your players goes a long way in how not only the players but their parents also take those initial successes or failures, right? Whatever message you're delivering, if you're delivering that they're the best team ever because they won 5-0 in their first game, probably expect that your next game is going to be a little bit soft, right? If you're super hard on them after a loss, then guess what? Like they're gonna want to come out and do better. I mean, you have to understand that communication early in the season is probably disproportionately more important than it is as you get into sort of the dog days of the season, right? The January's late January, where it's just everybody's sick of it being cold outside and drudging through the snow and slush to get into the rink, and everybody's tired and beat up, and there's only a couple hours of sunlight. So understand you're setting the tone. Like when you walk into that locker room those first couple times before and after those games, you're setting the tone. You're setting the expectations. And if they win a game, but they were soft in the game and they just happened to win because the opponent wasn't great, you need to let them know. That's important that they know that. Like, you didn't work hard enough. Congratulations, you won. Good for you. That's not good enough. That effort's not good enough. We're going to get back to work this afternoon, or we're going to get back to work tomorrow. Or, hey, come Tuesday practice, we're putting the work boots on.
because a couple things like you said, that team that goes 5-0 and now their ego's through the roof because the coach has been blowing them up, their parents are blowing them up, everyone's blowing them up, and they've maybe just won a couple of games because their goalie's been hot or whatever it is, but they're just kind of gliding by. When they come out and get smoked in that sixth game, that ego's going to crash down real quick, and people are going to start bickering. It's going to be that up and down effect. We want to make sure that everything, like you said earlier, that culture is intact early, because come the dog days of the season, that's when it's going to show dividends, right? That's when it's going to pay off to have those hard-nosed, hard-working guys that are willing to dig in, that know what the goal is, that know what the expectation is. Because guess what? Everybody's cold. Guess what? Everybody's tired. But that's when you see what your team is actually made of, right? When it's the third game in 3 nights and you don't want to be there. Nobody really wants to be there, but you got to get it done. So that's when it's your job as a coach to set the culture, set the expectation early that, hey, I don't really care how you feel. We got a job to do. We set goals at the start of the season, and this is just a part of it. This game is just one part of a bigger puzzle that we got to go out and take care of. So I think that's a great point. And something else I wanted to talk about. I know that the best year I had as a player, team-wise, I remember vividly having a meeting before the season, a couple of meetings, and our coach setting very, very detailed goals and expectations. And it was one of the few times that actually happened. It doesn't really go to show how much great coaching I had in my life, but this coach had it nailed down, and he was serious meeting, asked his team, what do you guys expect? We have this cup to play for, this cup to play for. What do you guys want to do this year? Do you guys want to make some money and go to the bar and hang out and party and meet girls? Or do you want to win cups? Like, what's it all about? Right? So what do you think about that, setting goals and expectations for your team?
I'm a big fan of doing it. I think you have to be really cautious on how you do it and be really aware that everybody's probably going to tell you that their goal is to win state or to win nationals. And I think that's where a lot of guys go wrong, is they stop there and they just say, okay, well, our goal is to win the national tournament. Well,
that's pretty easy to say.
Yeah, so
yeah.
Right. So are the other 150 ranked teams.
Yeah.
Like that's their goal too. So I think it's important to break it down into tangible, quantifiable pieces, and that's where I think the difference between just pie in the sky and actually rubber meets the road comes in. Is you have to have these pieces along the way that just say, well, in order, if our goal is to win nationals, then we need to understand that come January, we probably need to have this record, or we probably need to be ranked up in this region so that we make sure we get an opportunity to go to nationals. We need to make sure we're doing these things right. We need to win our league, or we need to, have whatever the goal is, but you have to have something quantifiable that you can kind of revisit as you go and really make short adjustments and say, we're on track, we're off track here. And if you're off track, great, get back to work, get back to focus, figure out what's broken, attempt to fix it, and keep going and keep measuring.
And even to break that down further, things like, if we want to be the champions this year or whatever, win nationals, what do we have to do every week? What kind of attitude do we have to bring? What kind of work ethic do we have to bring? What type of just overall, feeling do we have to bring to the rink every single day to make sure we do that, right? Like you said, no one's going to say, I'd like to go 50-50 this year and be home in early March. Nobody wants to do that, right? Everyone's going to say, I want to win the cup. I want to go, have a great season, right? So I think that like you said is an easy goal. I think that's a good point that's an easy goal, right? Anybody can say that goal. So find simple goals, find 30 goals you need to set along the way to get your team to that place where you can accomplish the big goal. So then you can build that momentum and build that good feeling along the way. So when you're 20-4 at the first break, and you can look back and say, okay, well, what did we do right to get here, right? And then you can say, what did we do wrong to not be here? Because when you look back, it's always easier to see the things you've done right and wrong looking back. So have that quarter of the season mark, that halfway, the 3/4, so you can really judge your team, look at the goals you've set out, and have you actually been doing them, right? I think setting goals and expectations is one thing, but are you doing them is a second thing. And the teams I've been successful with, we actually did those things for the most part. The teams we didn't, I was surrounded by a bunch of guys who just talked, right? Guys just talked. They talked on Monday. They talked on Tuesday. Come Friday, Saturday, the talk didn't really lead to a whole lot, right? So make sure those goals are tangible and you're reaching some type of win every single week.
Yeah, and one sort of tip that I found has worked really well for me is if I break my season into 10 to 12 game segments, it's a lot easier to wrap your head around it, not only as a coach, but for players too. In the youth world, 10 to 12 games. The reason I say 10 to 12 is because unfortunately in the youth world, sometimes you can only play 2 weeks and get 10 games in, and that's, I think, too short to really have a good quantifiable metric in place. So, the 12 kind of creeps into the 3-week mark. But I think if you break it into segments like that, it's really easy to review. And then within those breakdowns, it's important to help the athletes understand what to expect, right? And I'll give one example. So when you have a good team, what a lot of players on good teams don't realize is that being a good team actually means every game is going to be harder. And it sounds counterintuitive, but because they go, well, coach, we have a ton of talent in the locker room. That's great. In the States, we have, all our teams are ranked, and I think they do it the same in Canada. I mean, you can pull up a website and literally figure out where you rank across the country. Well, I got news. If you're in the top 10 and you're playing a 50th ranked team, that 50th ranked team has nothing to lose. So you need to have, a firm understanding. Your players have to understand this, that you're going to get that team's best game, period. Right? Like, you may be dog tired and think you can just walk through the game and win 10-0, but you're gonna have to show up and work like you're playing maybe a second place team in the league or in the country.
And you also have to realize that team's always going to be getting better as well, right? They're not just going to sit there and be 50th ranked and think, well, we'll just give up, right? Most teams are always going to be getting better. Most players are going to be getting better. So you got to keep doing the same to just keep elevating. Like, I've had teams where we went out 20-0 and guess what? We thought we were the shit, and guess what? Teams caught up to us real quick because we thought we could stop working. Right now, you can stop working. You're on top of the mountain, right? But I think the best teams, the best players, realize when they're at the top of the mountain, that's when you got to work harder, right? They always say it's lonely at the top because people are chasing you down, man. They're coming for you. So don't just rely on your last game or your last effort or your last practice. Always be striving to get better as a group.
Yeah, I mean, the most dangerous opponent is one with nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So when you're at the top of the heap, everybody below you pretty much has nothing to lose.
Yeah, and let's be honest. So it's hard, right? It's hard to keep that momentum and that motivation going when you are 20-0 or you're in first place or you're first in the nation, right? It's hard. So you as a coach have to realize that. Like, you as a coach can't get that overinflated ego and not still be on your players and not be pushing them and having cruisy practices and stuff like that. That culture and those expectations have to remain the same, or else, just like we said, everything flows downhill, right? If your coach is cruisy and overconfident, then guess what? Your players are going to perform the same. So keep on them, keep on the throttle, keep getting better, keep improving, keep learning, and just keep pushing.
Keep pushing, yeah, absolutely. I do also want to mention how much I think it's important in the early part of the season to review video. Review video not only with yourself, but with your team as well. Like, you just have to go through and you have to figure out exactly what's happening. And I think I think you'll cover so much more ground if you can show them, hey guys, we were really bad at getting on pucks. right? Again, I'm using that as the example because I said that's one of the things that I focus on early in the season. Well, after this weekend, our first weekend of games, I'm going to go through it. Hey guys, we did a great job getting on pucks. We struggled on rotations, right? Or hey, we were really slow. F1 was really slow getting on the puck. F2, you're not even close to where you need to be. So give them something tangible. It will tremendously speed up that process through the early months.
For sure. And I think oftentimes coaches will say those things and you'll get a lot of the and the player will say something back. He'll be like, no, but what about, but when you bring that video up and you slow it down and you say, hey, you were late on the back check, and he's trying to give you the but he's still at the far blue line on the videotape, there's not a whole lot the guy can say, right? And if you do that in a productive way, it like you said, it speeds things up, especially when things like breakouts and the neutral zone and all these kind of different areas on the ice that you want to control. A lot of guys have a hard time learning in the moment during practice, right? When you're trying to teach systems and things are happening fast and the coach is saying, let's do this, and you get with your line and you see that one winger, he's just like, I don't have a clue, but I'm not going to say anything. But then he's going to screw up the drill. He's going to screw up the breakout, whatever it may be. But if you can slow that down on him on the video and explain to him more simply how it all works, and things just click differently for different people, I've learned, right? And even for myself, I've been like, that doesn't make sense. But then I've seen it on the video and I'm like, that's so simple. How didn't I get that before, right? But I think it's a great point. I'll give a quick story about some great video work from the exact same coach I mentioned before. He was the coach I had before, and we were looking for a new coach, and someone said, do you want to bring this guy in? I said, yeah, let's bring him in. I kind of vouched for him. He was a good coach, good guy. And he was probably with us for like 2-3 weeks. He hadn't seen me in a while. He was coaching somewhere else. And I was the captain of the team. So he brought me in for a meeting one day, and he goes, hey, Matty, I got to show you something on the video. And he brought up like 4 or 5 clips, and he looked me in the eye, and he goes, I'm sorry, but this is going to be another explicit episode. He goes, Matty, I do not remember you being so fucking soft. And I just sat back in my chair and I couldn't believe he said that to me. I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, what do you mean soft? Because I didn't think I was playing soft. But he brought up like 5 clips where like I went into the corner, some guy like lifted the puck off lifted my stick, and I just like, no battle, no pushback. I just gave up on the play, you know what I mean? But I had no idea I was doing that. So it's like that clip, that little meeting right there changed my game. You know what I mean? After that, I'm like, you don't want to be called soft, first of all. And second of all, when you see yourself playing soft or whatever it may be, lazy, not back checking, not passing the puck, man, there's nowhere to hide. Where are you going to go? He's got you. And I was mad at him because he said that, but like a more grown up self realizes that was a great piece of coaching right there.
Yeah. And if you as a coach play that back and the answer comes back with excuse after excuse after excuse, then now you know what you've got as a player. Yeah. And you know what? Like those are I've had them, right? You get at least one every year, it seems like, but no, it's unreal when you as a coach present something that's just black and white, and they go, well, yeah, but so and so or this and that. It's a tough spot, but yeah. At least at least you know that player is not. He's on his own wavelength. He's only caring about himself, and you know how to react from that.
For sure, and I just think, yeah, like you said, it just tells a lot. Like sometimes, guys, you just have to admit when you're beat or when you made a mistake. Like I've had a couple examples this week just in my life of people making glaring mistakes that weren't able to just say, "Hey, man, I'm sorry, I messed that one up. My bad." Right? I think as a player, that's a skill to have. You just say, "I messed it up. My bad." Like, I didn't realize I didn't realize I was losing every battle. You know what I mean? You get in habits. You get in habits where I had a coach for a couple of years. He wasn't that hard on me. I got away with everything, right? And he liked me as a person, whatever. And so that habit just translated till next year when I got to a new coach and he couldn't believe it. And so all I had to say was, my bad. I'll start winning these battles. And I probably didn't say that. I probably sulked out of the room and I told my buddies, I cannot believe he just said that to me. But then realizing later that he was right, and you just move on, you make those adjustments. And if you're not willing to make adjustments and take some things as your fault, you're never going to improve as a player or a coach, right? So just take it with a grain of salt and get yourself going.
Yeah. Analyze it for something that's tangible, something you can take away and improve on.
For sure.
Oh, that's good stuff. So early season, set your culture, review, get to know your players, right? Don't hold your results in super high or super low regard. Just get your plan together and ask for help if you need it.
For sure. Make sure they know what the expectations are, right? You as a coach got to let them know. If some guy's going to show up 5 minutes late every single day, if you're going to let him do that, that's not going to be, he's going to keep doing that. So make sure they know. Like, I'll give a quick story. My last year, we had a player coach, and I was kind of the player assistant coach. So I would help him out, design practice, do whatever, set the lines. Halfway through the year, his wife unfortunately passed away, and he had to go deal with a lot of stuff with his family for a couple of weeks, so I was in charge. And we had this one guy who I actually had to drive to the rink with every single day. I told the guys when I was a coach, I wanted the respect. I said, I'm in charge now. We're on the ice at whatever, 7 o'clock. I want you guys out there at 7 o'clock. Not 7:01, not 7:02, 7 o'clock, right? And so this guy, for like 2 days in a row, it would be 7:04, and I'd be like, is this guy kidding me? Is he kidding me right now? Like, we're all trying to come together as a team, and this guy's going to drag his feet. And so I had to drive home with this guy every day to and from the rink. So the third day, he comes out at 7:05. And I had to bust his ass. You know what I mean? I had to make him do lines. I had to whatever. I had to ream him out. But you got to do these things, right? You just have to, however you want to do it, however you want to discipline your player, that's up to you. But if you don't set that expectation, you're just going to continue to get walked on throughout the season. So that was one uncomfortable ride home, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, I bet. I'll give an example from from my season. It's real simple. On Thursdays we have skill sessions, and I got a report that one of my guys wasn't necessarily fully engaged, shall we say, and so I just said, I didn't make a huge deal out of it, but in the locker room I said, guys, here's how this works: is you'll get one warning. After that warning, you won't be invited back to Thursday skills. If you're not at Thursday skills, you won't play in one game during the weekend. So you figure it out, exactly. Right? Exactly. It's simple. It's simple. If you can't figure out how to get through a practice, and can't figure out how to be focused through a practice, then okay,
there's consequences, right?
We're not going to be playing. Exactly, we're not going to play on the weekend. So, you just have to set those expectations early, and then, lo and behold, guess what? The following week, everything was fine.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier, you have to have a great relationship with your players, but there has to be that hard line in the sand. And I think that's one thing I'm going to definitely take away from this podcast that you mentioned, that you can be buddy-buddy, you can have a good relationship, but they got to know what's up. They got to know what the expectations are. And that's going to be that, right? All right, guys, that is it for this week's episode of the Hockey Coach Podcast. If you're looking to find more stuff on Kevin, you can find him at HockeyShare at hockeyshare.com. If you're looking to find out more about me, you can find me on all social media outlets at Hockey Pro Training and hockeyprotraining.com. If you guys have any questions you want to get answered on the show, Kevin, where do they get those questions in?
hockeyshare.com/questions, or you can DM us on pretty much any of the major social media platforms as well.
Beautiful. And like always, thanks for stopping by, and we will see you guys at the next episode. Bye for now.